We've planned well. We have implemented fairly well, dodging through the ravines, going through unexpected obstacles, and we've kind of reached the end of the journey there. But as we're doing that, there is obviously someone whose people have spent time and efforts trying to do this. And there is someone who's given the go-ahead to say, okay, go and spend time, resource, money. Prithvi spoke about build or buy. Both of this requires resources. Buy requires money, build requires actual resources on the ground. Because someone has actually approved that, that person and many other stakeholders in the organization are going to constantly ask you questions about where is the ROI, right? I mean, you don't want to get onto such a large transformative project without being able to actually prove that the ROI is significant. And you can't prove this typically at the end, you got to typically prove this along the way. So who better than our next guest, Satadru Banerjee from Aditya Birla Group, a group which is totally different to the other two speakers who spoke about, because they're talking of IT, yes. Here's a group that is virtually into everything that you can think of, from mining to fiber to technology and so on and so forth. Satadru will take us through a quick journey on how they built the ROI model, how they proved back to stakeholders that the steps that they took for this transformation journey was actually worth it. Again, a quick snippet about Satadru, which I thought we can bring out, is that he says he's an avid sports person, but the thing that he clearly stands by is the fact that he wants to celebrate the smallest wins and he's not afraid of losing. Now, who better than him to explain that in an ROI journey, celebrating each win as you go step by step towards your journey is as important as showing the final picture. So, Satadru, all over to you.
Thank you. Difficult and a daunting task when you have such eminent speakers alongside. So, great to be here with the community, okay? With the community that makes a difference. And while we go to the presentation and we talk about ROI and all of that bit, but one thing which I wanted to understand, what does ROI mean to some of you guys sitting here? So, any definitions of ROI? Return on investment, okay? Anything else? See, for me, ROI means risk of ignoring. There are times that we always keep asking, what's the value, what's the value, what's the value? I always look at things beyond, what's the risk of ignoring a particular way of working? What's the risk of not adapting to things which are going to make a transformational shift, okay? How is it different? It's very important. So I think risk of ignoring has to step forward as businesses keeps on asking. That's a byproduct. But as we look at it from a group standpoint, I think, are we there? Are we thinking future? Are we thinking something different that the competition has not even thought of? Okay? So imagine, all the solutions which are doing great. Imagine traveling in this city without a Google map. Right? Do you ask, what's the ROI? What's the risk of ignoring such kind of a massive, solution or massive technology which is there with us? How do we adopt that technology is something to us, okay? Every business, every organization has their own fabric, okay? And the mindset. So we'll go through the presentation. Deriving ROI post, you select the product or you define as you go along the journey. So for us at a group level, we thought that we need to define it in a different way. So whenever we talk about ROI, these are all things which are embedded in the entire ecosystem for us. We need to think about our people who are going to drive this, okay? We have to think about the kind of documents, the kind of processes, all of that we have, okay? We have to think of the data, In terms of adapting to a new system, adapting to a lot of things, we don't even at times try to understand what we have within. So it's very important to understand, introspect, know what is there within the organization. And while you do all of this, there are senses that you get and wherein you typically tend to mitigate some amount of risks, okay, as you go along. And you create your own communication plan. So when you think a product or a service that you want to implement will give you great ROI, I think you would do this couple of things, right, at the outset. I always believe a product or anything that we do, if I love something doing it, I will do it. So I call this, where your heart really is. So if you really love doing what you do, you make the product work. And that is where you deliver the full value, right? If today you have a product given by, a business head or a talent lead gives you a product, say, hey, please use it. You do not have an option but to probably use it. But do you really own that product is the question. The moment you start owning a product or a service or a process or a function completely, and this for me is passion, which comes as a part of my core values, So if you're really passionate, if your heart is there where, your mind is, and both of them are together, you start to deliver a lot of things which delivers the ultimate ROI for an organization in terms of commercial value. Okay? So I think a couple of things which is very important, very simple words at the end of the day, but has a very impactful messaging when it actually has to happen in an organization. So when I say strong communication or a consistent communication plan, how does a new solution that you are going to implement or an organization of ABG's kinds or a stature is going to implement, which has deep into manufacturing, services, business, communicate with the community? Okay, we have recruiters sitting out of very remote locations. We have recruiters sitting out of Bangalore. We have recruiters sitting out of a very, very small city in India, which probably most of you wouldn't have heard the name of the city. How all of them get the message in a very similar way, which impacts their day and which impacts the hiring as a process for them. Okay, that's very important. When we look at at adoption, I'm sure you would have experienced this in your organization as well. There are somebody in the organization who are very early adopters. Okay, there are people who are laggards, and in between is that big fat belly, which I call, which is the set of people who can actually make the huge difference if you club that piece with the early adopters. So how we can integrate that middle portion with the early adopters is something which is going to significantly deliver the ROI. Because to previous speaker's point, when you are implementing a product, it has 6, 8, 9 months, 10 months journey, and where speaker said that you identify a product, by the time you implement, the team has changed, okay? Account managers have changed from the product side, everything has changed. So that said, imagine if your internal audience gets a flavor of different product managers, different teams working with you, how is it going to impact? So I think it's very important to understand your set of audience internally and reduce that big fat belly where people are always pushed to adopt a product rather than they adopting the product themselves. So I think consistent messaging, consistent celebrations of small aspects where they are showcasing some kind of value that they have done, okay, some kind of engagement that has happened is very important, because in this long value chain you will find a lot of people changing. But what doesn't change is the moments of success, the moments of engagements that you create, and this slowly becomes your advocates, your success stories, your milestones that you have built over the implementation journey. And that actually talks about how the ROI from a product point of view gets finally delivered. Okay. Also, when we look at a product, we look at a product at the outset and say, okay, this is great. Whether you build or buy, story different. But you look at a product and think that this is your business scenario. But as we go along the journey, as we are a conglomerate and there are multiple businesses, right? There is one business which is a very stable business for us, doing well. We are leaders in that particular segment. But one business is very dynamic and changing like anything that's happening right now. Don't want to name, but still. So, when you adopt a product, do you continue with that product till the time you have implemented, or you pit stop certain modifications, evolve with the market and go? Because the moment you start looking at an ROI, significantly it's important that you evolve the product as you go along implementing this. Okay? So if you thought that this is the product I selected as an organization and we are going to implement this, I'm sure from start to finish, a lot has changed in between, right? And the business guy comes and asks you, will it really make an impact now that the business has changed? Do you agree to this? Does this happen in your life space? 2 years back, a solution was captured from the market, best solution we need to implement. 1 year down the line, market has itself changed. So do you want to evolve while you are going implementing? That builds the ROI. So I think it's very important that you co-own, co-create, and co-develop a product to ensure that the highest value of that product is delivered. Because at times what happens is scenarios are very different. And especially for us, adoption drivers, which leads to a significant amount of ROI implications. I don't know how many of you would have experienced this full hog, but in a complex scenario like ours, we would have experienced this at a much deeper aspects is what I would say. There are different businesses with different plans, okay? So I have a manufacturing business, I have a retail business, financial services business, and different kinds of business. Every business leader has a different plan. Every CHR of a different business has a different plan. Now, if as a group I have to showcase an ROI, I have to take care of every single aspect, right? I can't show a standalone ROI in one entity and say, this works for this, but obvious question by my director HR is, great, but what happens to the rest? So in a conglomerate kind of a setup, it's extremely important that we take everybody along and we move forward. Some of my colleagues who are sitting in the audience would typically appreciate that, we really do this kind of approach when we solution anything. And that is where the actual ROI comes in, because it's not for one entity, it's not for one business, or it's not for one line within a particular business. It's for the entire group. The moment you think wide, the moment you think wholesome, I think you start to identify more and you start to deliver more. So the moment you think myopic, this is what I want to do, this is a hiring tool, I want to do this. Okay, that's great as a hiring tool. Okay, that's great as an interview assessment tool. But what are the other factors that you are bringing into the table? How the life is changing that of a recruiter, that of a hiring manager, that of a partner that you are working with, and how the brand is getting conceptualized externally, internally, all this to be asked. And the moment you think business as a whole, you tend to answer more. The moment you tend to answer more, you tend to deliver more. So that's something which we felt as an organization is critical and it's very important. So you have to tend to take every business together and move forward. So that's something where your ROI gets catapulted in terms of dollar value. In terms of engagement, we spoke about it. Communication is at the heart. It doesn't matter how small a communication is. There are multiple various methods of communication which are evolving. People do communication on a WhatsApp group these days. People do send mailers. Traditional communication, call everybody inside a town hall, do communication, do a change management. But do you do communication with only the HR folks? Or you first get into the communication with the hiring managers or your business? And I strongly believe as business heads looks at the SAP dashboards, what is happening at the plant, what production is happening, what's my lost time, and all of this, they should equally have a dashboard on their screens on the HR dashboard, okay? And that can only happen if you engage your hiring managers. You can engage your business. So as production is as damn critical, knowing their health of the organization through these hiring platforms is that damn critical. So communicate. The more you communicate, the better you engage and better value you tend to leverage out of it. Co-selection, I said this is very, very important. Look at a classical example, okay? I love this country, India, and I still believe one of our values in an organization is a lot of Indianness. So when you go to pick up a car, do you go alone or you carry your family along? And okay, though you have the budget, but probably you want your wife, kids, everybody to go and pick up that car, right? You like a color, but your son or daughter says, I like this color, can we go for it? Maybe we do compromise, right? At times. Maybe we agree, maybe we do. At times we compromise. So I'm saying when you take business along with you, okay, they tend to understand what HR goes through as a process, what technology is offering at this point in time, what is that we can get at this point in time, what is that we can build at this time, and what is that we can start, because not everything is delivered at the outset. Okay, so if you start implementing something, don't expect everything happening right now. So how can you build, how can you, have this mindset created internally within your ecosystem so that they understand what is coming their way, so that they expect, and your ROIs and their ROIs are aligned together. Most often or not, it so happens that it's a departure. You expect X, they expect Y, and there is a gap. And then this classical conflict between managers or boardroom conflict keeps on happening. So that said, this is very, very critical built from an ROI perspective. And capability building. I think this is a no-brainer. Whatever you do at the end of the day, if you do not have people inside the organization who can run it successfully, I might give you a great car, but if you are not the right person to drive it, it doesn't make sense, right? 0 to 100, 3 seconds flat. Do you know how to drive that kind of speed? So I think it's extremely important that we build capabilities inside the organization in a way wherein we can deliver that kind of speed, agility, okay, efficiency that we are talking about. So this is something very significantly important. Adoption drivers, world has changed, right? How we look at things and how we perceive things. Interfaces have become really, really, smart. You log into a particular platform, 10 years back it was very different, 5 years back it's different. As we speak today, the platforms are evolving. So, interfaces, if they have different, user behavior if it has been different, and the way we access the platforms has also changed. Desktop, laptops, mobiles, right? Imagine the transition that has happened, okay? So that said, if everything has changed, transactions are happening on a screen of 3 or a 4 centimeter, imagine how you can leverage, okay? How you can leverage a hiring manager who has only this much of window to do his or her transactions, only this much of screen space, only this much of bandwidth to do certain things, okay? How can you do that? So think this while you pick up your product, you pick up your solutions, and engage your hiring managers or your business in terms of driving the ROI. One of the important things, which is at the last, I think it's gamify. Gamify the kind of usage patterns that you have. Not everybody will have, a similar pattern of usage. Business will vary. Maturity of recruiters also would determine the kind of usage. But each one of them would bring some value into the entire process. So if you can gamify, if you can integrate that and show them, there will be a significant value in terms of delivering the ROI. And this is my last slide. Whatever we do, we typically impact all of this, right? So there is a business impact. There is a business case that why we are doing what we are doing for. It impacts cost, efficiency, turnaround times, effectiveness, all that happens, okay? These are clearly tangible, measurable. You have your data, you have your documents to prove that this is working this way. There are users, and I think significant value or the ROI comes across when everybody in the value chain is using and creating that kind of an impact. Because currently what we have seen, most of the tools are challenged in terms of an adoption rate. There are not many advocates internally. I'm not too sure if inside this room, everybody believes that the product that they are using serves their purpose. And they want to recommend it to their friends in the same profession. Show of hands, do you believe? Very few hands. That means it typically tells you that a product has either not well understood well or implemented well, so that it's not getting advocated better. If it is not being advocated better, if it is not being, advertised well, that means the usage and the ROI is not delivered. So unfortunately, this room has only less than 10% who can advocate for a product that they are using. That means their organization is not getting the right value, right? So that brings me to the last point. If you are not advocating the solution that you are using, what brand you are talking about that you represent, right? You are using a hiring process, you are using a tool, and you are not confident. Question to you, think about it. How do you adopt? How do you measure? How do you impact? Okay. Thank you. You have been a great audience. I see 1 minute. I timed myself so that I have 1 minute left. So thank you so much, guys. It's been a great experience for me, great learning for me, and hope to be back on the stage to discuss few more questions that you have. Thank you.